Can you help us break down the different categories of fees that might be associated with building an ADU?
25 to 30,000 if you're getting a high design architect that is going to make you a very beautiful ADU and have all the materials. I fall in a little bit more of the middle category. So like for a single ADU, it's about 13,000 is what I charge for. And then if I do multiple, it's 10,000 each up to 60. For city fees, typically the review fee, like first fee you pay to the city is between 15 and 3,000. After the plans have been reviewed and corrections are done, and they're like, okay, let's pull our permit. It depends on the size. For ADUs after 750 square feet, there are development fees, like an extra 5,000 added to the project. After 500 square feet, there's school fees, around $5 a square foot. Construction costs, it depends on the design decisions you made. In the LA area, around 275 to 350 a square foot. And I see up to like 100, 600 in like high demand areas like San Francisco or Santa Barbara.
How many inspections do take place? Is there rough framing, plumbing, electricals? Can you walk through kind of some of the inspections that the resident that is hiring you should expect to kind of go through or have the contractor go through during the build
Yeah,
process?
it can be 12 to 24 inspections, and you start off with your foundation, then you go to your footings and making sure the bottom structural elements are good. Then there's rough framing, rough plumbing, rough electrical, rough mechanical. So that very first part, then it goes to like your drywall and your taping and your lath, which is preparing the exterior for whatever finish you have. And there are multiple inspections during this point. And a failed inspection doesn't mean your guy is failure. This happens all the time, and not everybody who has already worked with these people. It's going to happen, and you fix it. This was part of the process. And they come out again the next day or whenever it's ready. Then from there, you get closer to your finish inspections and making sure that the waterproofing is done and that water drains correctly in the showers and in the sinks. And then from there, you have your final inspection, which is really a check of all the systems, solar panels, a pressure test for the sprinklers, because that's kind of near the end as well. But also when you get a job card, when the permits are pulled, it has these list of inspections on there. So you can ask to see that and familiarize yourself with what's going to be on there.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Guys, today I got the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who's fighting for more housing in California, the guy that is ready to go toe to toe with any department to create housing and advocate for his clients. I follow this guy religiously, watching his stories, watching how he fights for his clients, and more importantly, just create more housing in California. So I'm so glad to welcome back Andrew Slocum. How you doing today, man?
Hey, Ken, I'm doing well. How are you?
Man, I am fantastic. I know it's early, it's Saturday, but you and I are so passionate about housing, and we're like, hey, Saturday, why not? 7 o'clock, why not? Let's go ahead and talk about housing. Man, I know you as the guy that just is so good, right? I interviewed you and your partner Terry before on a podcast, and I just knew I had to bring you back when I saw all the amazing work that you're doing with the rebuild that's going on. So maybe that's a good place to pick it up. Like, what's going on right now, Andrew, in the world of like rebuilding and building in California in general?
Yeah, I mean, we have two, I would say, almost cities that were destroyed by the fire, right? Altadena is pretty much gone. Pacific Palisades, almost the same thing. The fire that took them out really, I mean, it is very emotional when you go through there and see that. So we have two completely different areas, different in economics, different cities, different jurisdictions, and they're taking different paths. And I have decided to work in the Altadena, Eaton Fire area. I'm based in Pasadena, so it makes sense. And that's the one I'm working with because it's my sphere of influence. The people who are living around me have lost their homes there. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing infrastructure being rebuilt. We're seeing streets and debris going through the city all day long, trucks after trucks after trucks taking debris in and out. And it is just a whole system going on right now. And for me, we see homes, just starting to break ground.
Wow, man, it's so the fires were just so recent, and to hear the progress that's happening right now, it's incredible, right? But sometimes the news, the media, they forget about the fire because it's past the news cycle, right? And to hear from you that dump trucks and all this movement is happening on, but help us understand, in order to even start rebuilding, you mentioned like, hey, they had to start rebuilding infrastructure. Has that already started happening? Like, do we see power lines go down and water not like the water system not working? Like, how much work did the city have to put in place before you kind of start your process to even get to breaking ground and building the home?
Yeah, in Altadena, which is under the jurisdiction of Southern California Edison, they were the first ones back. Southern California Edison was the first. They had trucks there immediately, and they had cranes out there moving poles. I would say they were one of the first groups there. They were getting infrastructure back right away, and within 4 to 6 weeks afterwards, they were saying they were almost complete with the repair of power lines and poles that they lost. They had lost an entire substation, so they had to rebuild that, and that took a little bit longer. A lot of the water infrastructure wasn't too bad, given that it's underground, but they have had problems because when they're testing the pressure, a lot of the water valves were open. So they go to test it and there's water shooting out somewhere else. So they can't test the
Oh,
pressure because people are using the fire hydrants. And so pressure, they have to go check every time they do it because there's no like regular water. People are just using fire hydrants. So that's just an interesting problem that we didn't think we needed to have. Gas after the fire, gas lines were still going. So there was little fires on these houses still going. So they had to shut off the gas, and now we're taking the lines back to where they came from the street and going to put them back into our new houses that we.
wow. Man, that just shows the extensiveness of the rebuild efforts, and I just didn't wanna underestimate how much work that is. And I just think about how sometimes when a household goes through something that's that tragic, you're a sense of comfort, Andrew, because you come in and you understand exactly how to build. You read building codes for fun, which is the most awesome thing ever. And do they get the process started? Now, when they come to you, do they say, "Hey, I already filed the claims for my insurance," and are you working with the insurance companies, or are you working with the clients directly? Tell us about how the dynamic kind of all works.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should take a step back into the very beginning, and that most people, when they bought their home, they went and shopped and picked out maybe one to two or three that they liked that were already built. Very few people ever built a home. So this is all very foreign. If anything, I think it pointed out how difficult it is, the process of plans and permitting, and how it's completely foreign on how this goes about. And for me, I'm a little disconnect because I do this every day. So I know the path. But if you have no idea what you're doing, you don't even know the first person to call. Many people think, let's call a contractor and let's get a price. But what is a contractor giving you a price on? You don't have plans. You don't know exactly what you're building. So they're going to give you a range. And unfortunately, that range, from what I'm being told, is 300 a square foot to 1,000 a square foot. People
What?
saying that it's going to cost us $1,000 a square foot to rebuild, and most people were not completely insured or underinsured, so that scares them away. That number is just it's not even feasible to rebuild what they even had at that number. So the timeline looks like someone reaching out to me saying, I have either engaged my insurance or I need help with that. And we do work with the insurance and take a look at if you have maybe an extra rebuild credit or different credits for different items, landscaping, and try to break that up to see what our pot looks like. My first step before that even is like what did you lose and what do you want? There's this very hard mental exercise from what I had before that I loved. I loved my house, and I have this blank template and I can build whatever I want. And so it's been a struggle to go back and forth of saying I had this fireplace in the corner here and this is where the bathroom was. And I'm like, yes, we could rebuild it exactly that way, but you could also do whatever you want. And that process has been part of the design process. Once we get through that, it has been relatively quick considering LA County used to take a year very easily. Now it's looking like 6 weeks. Some plans and got planning approval within 2 hours. That's definitely
Wow.
an outlier, but it's never I've never seen anything like that before. So the one of the first houses we're rebuilding took a total of 6 weeks to go through planning, to go through building and safety review, and it was a very, very light review. They were just focusing on the things that actually matter for building and not so much on the text or some of the other things that aren't very important. That is the timeline right now. I'd say about 6 weeks. I can tell it's starting to slow down. Some of the plan reviews are more intensive, and that's definitely going to slow things down. So I think we'll probably be, closer to 3 months, 4 months, five, even longer as more people submit and more people wait.
Wow. So if I were to say it back to you, right, Andrew, I mean, let me dive a little bit deeper when you said it takes 6 weeks for the plans to get approved. So from the time the homeowner has that conversation with you, right? You said, hey, what have you lost and what do you want? Do they say, hey, I want the same 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, and then you give them some options for how that home might look like when it's rebuilt, whether that's like some sort of virtual drawing or something like that. And then you work on the plans and then it takes 6 weeks. Help me just get super clear because I'm sure so many people have so many questions that are like this for you. So I want to make sure I get to the bottom of exactly
Yeah, no,
what that process
that's
looks like.
That's a good point because the 6 weeks happens after we get this design phase in. So my process, and I did not do single family homes before this. This was very new to me, but I knew I couldn't just let my neighbors just sit there and someone else come in and take advantage of them. I know I'm extremely good at this, so I can't just sit and wait. So my process has been, what did you have as far as the square footage, and what do you want? What are your needs are? What do you want to do with this property? And also help them think of it, even though it'll be the home that they live in, but think of it as an investment too. So that if they hand it down to someone else or when they have to refinance, that it all makes financial sense for them as well for what they have to build. And so I just take a narrative. What would you like it to look like? Would you like 4 bedrooms? Is there something you always wanted in a house? Do you want a nook to where you look out the window? Just give me a narrative of what you're looking like, and then I come back with them with the very first floor plan and elevation saying, "Okay, off everything you gave me, this is what I think it should look like. Let's work through this." And I would say it's taken 2 to 3 times to get to the perfect set that they're like, "This is everything I
Okay.
want." And that
Okay.
process can be a week, it can be 2 weeks. It's how quickly we sit down and we meet and we do it. So I would say 2 weeks is about the average time frame for this, like, design development of getting the floor plans of what you want. We also, like, pick out the siding that you want at first, and then I use that to determine what architectural style. So if you want, like, vertical siding, like, okay, we might go with a Craftsman or a Bungalow and just use that for the architectural side because that part usually is up to, like, the architect decides, but I kind of throw it to the homeowner to say, I like this exterior appeal, what fits with it? And after that point, then my team puts together the structural engineering, the Title 24, and finishes the architectural sheet. So that's another week after, let's say, the 2 weeks for design development, and that's where that 6 weeks starts.
I see. And then once you send those plans to the planning department, then there's the back and forth, right? They might give you some corrections. They might tell you, hey, this doesn't line up with the categories that matter, and using kind of your words there. Is
Yeah.
that sound right? Like, how many back and forths do you typically have with the city usually?
Yeah, so and who knows if she would ever watch this, but there's a lady who's working in the planning department, and she is sometimes working till 1 AM. I'll get
Wow.
emails from her saying, "Can you this is approved," or "We're working on this." So from the planning review, because at LA County, they split it up between a planning review and a building and safety. Once you finish your planning, then
Uh,
they send it over to building and safety. It's not concurrent. So far, the planning review, it's just been one round of corrections. They're pretty clear with it. And some of this is because it's a first time for me, and not all of my projects are what they're calling like for like. So instead of just a 10% increase in what was there before, the first one I did was a 100% increase. It was double the size of what the home was before. So there was some things that I wasn't familiar with on, like, what the setback actually should be because we're not using the one we had before. We have to go under the new standard. I was not sure at first if everything needed fire sprinklers and solar panels, and they need that. So it was a little bit of a learning process on the community standards since I was not completely familiar with it. but I also am not going to read this entire document when we can do a round of corrections and see what gets caught up. So my process is more like submit, find out, and then quickly fix whatever comes up.
Okay, this is so good because I'm glad you brought up the like for like terminology because what are they defining as like for like? Does it have to be a single family for a single family home? Is that the threshold we're talking about? Or is it, hey, can I build a single family home and add an ADU because maybe the homeowner wants to have another unit for their kids or their parents that are aging out? What does sort of like for like mean in the cities that you're working
Yeah, I think this is very important because there's been this like selling point that this is what you have to do. And you don't have to. And I think if you did not have the home you wanted, that you really shouldn't be stuck in this box. I mean, you lost everything. You get to create what you want within the means of how much dollars you have, but you shouldn't be stuck in that. So so far what it's been is like, okay, the planning department will look at the records and we do too and say there was 1,000 square foot home. Okay, got it. That 1,000 square feet can now be increased by 10%. So now you could have 1,100. They aren't completely checking how many bedrooms or baths you had. They aren't checking the exact square footage of each room. Like it's not an even split from, my experience. And then you're able to keep some of the setbacks if you had something that was a little bit substandard to what you had before. And other than that, you're just exempted from the school fees. That is one thing.
at?
So a new construction above the like for like has to pay for the school fees, which is around $5 a square foot. So it's a little bit of a price tag, but what you're getting, especially if it's valued at 600 or 700 a square foot, you pay that all day, every day to get the home that you want. If you are trying to stick within the like for like, you cannot add anything new in that submittal. So if you're going to do an ADU or you're going to do a garage conversion or something you didn't have, you have to do that as a second submittal. So we have two different projects running concurrently. If they're on the same set of plans, then it's not a like for like. And so we have to run them separately. It's basically a paperwork exercise because I have the other unit on one set of plans and not on the other, but it's completely designed to have both of them. We just separate the two and they get ran concurrently as two separate submittals. And I've had that happen a few times where we did something like it had an attached ADU as a garage conversion. Instead, we detached it. And that wasn't considered like for like, even though it was the same square footage. They really mean like for like within 10%. So there is a very strict box of what that looks like. But I don't think anyone should really be too focused on that if that's what they want to do. Now, the insurance companies have not said, are you building like for like or anything? They just said, give us a construction contract on what it's going to cost and tell us if you're building within the same bedrooms and bathrooms you had before. And so far, I've not had anyone question that. And very likely, an insurance agent is not going to read plans or even know what the heck they're looking at or ask for permits. So we'll see how that goes. And all the money that the insurance pays out goes to rebuild the home anyway. So it's not being used for anything else. That's kind of what I've been seeing as the process on like for like and just a new fire rebuild.
Wow. So let me dive a little bit deeper. So when you said earlier, if it wasn't like for like, you had to pay the approximately $5 per square foot of development fee. Is that for the entire project or is that just for the incremental square footage above and beyond what was previously?
The entire residence because previously one of the homes was 1,200 and we went to 24. We paid the $5 per square foot on the 2,400.
Got it. And I just want to point out you made such a great point. You paid an extra $5 per square foot just for that piece, but you got to create $600, $700 of value in the home. That is an investment that you typically do not see anywhere in the world. So I'm really glad you're educating folks on that piece because it's so crucial for how they make decisions. And then when you talked about the like for like and having to submit the ADU separately, like for like probably just expedites the process, right? So does that mean that if you submit an ADU on separate plans, that might go a lot slower? Tell the audience like what that might mean.
I think that is going to be the process soon, but right now there's not enough projects that it matters. And the first one I was able to get approved was not like for like because there just wasn't that many projects. I'm pretty much competing against myself on my
Wow.
other projects, competing against mine. So think I think eventually Like for like will be prioritized. How they do that, I'm not sure once there's a pool of projects, but right now, even that isn't a selling point for me because I've already done non-like for like and they're already permitted and shovels in the ground. So that speed is not really something I'm concerned. Now, if you were adding an ADU to the non-like for like, well, the state already has streamlining processes built into it where they have to review it in 60 days anyway. So if you're worried about it being slowed down, but you're going to add an ADU, if you use that process, and even sometimes it could be something like adding a junior ADU out of one of the bathrooms, and then you take that out after the first review because really the junior ADU is just calling the room a unit. So you can manipulate those standards in order to streamline the approval if it starts to slow down. I mean, right now it's lightning fast compared to what they did before. So that those tools and those tips aren't needed. But I think with how many homes we have and when people start getting together, you may want to do something to be a little bit more competitive.
What a pro tip, dude. I love that, man. So let's keep talking about the timeline, right? So we talked about anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks to kind of get the planning, the options, the design kind of all set. 6 weeks to get through planning, building, and safety. When should people start engaging the contractors? Because that must be a question you get all the time. Like, do I start talking to you right away, Andrew, and then talking to the contractor? What are you recommending to your clients?
I suggest they talk to me right away first. So that way we can at least get a concept of what we're going to build and maybe a rough floor plan or even try to get to a square foot or something to where they can talk to a contractor and give them something that's more tangible than I want to rebuild a house. And some of those conversations have just been that way. And that's why you get such a wide range. And once we have developed a rough set of plans, then I go to my group of trusted contractors. I have 3 that I work with, and then tell them, "Okay, this is what we're looking at. This is where we're placing it. Is there any site constraints that we aren't aware of, sloping, different soil, or something we should be aware of that might increase this cost more than what we planned for?" And then we get just a rough ballpark that'll say, "Yeah, we're good in the realm of what we planned for on how much money's there if it's coming just from the insurance and no additional." Then once I get the first set of comments back from building and safety, that's when I get an actual bid that we can use for that's the full number and it breaks down the line items because at that point we have no more surprises and we have a full set of plans that show how we're structurally building the foundation, how we're building the structural elements of the walls, the roof areas, the footings, the things that are big ticket items. We can see how much linear square foot we're building of these items. And then we can really get down to a price that says, this is it. This is the number versus no longer doing conceptual ranges of 300 to 350 or whatever that may be.
This is good. I love this. I love how well you explained that, Andrew. That was so good, man. And obviously, when you get this bid, that would probably follow a normal build, anyways. But in this scenario for a rebuild, at that point, when you get that bid, is that when the homeowner will take that bid and give it to the insurance company as a construction budget? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, if we're having to speak with the insurance company and maybe there's an extra rebuild credit, we can work off of just the initial design phase to get some numbers in front of them to see what they're going to approve, what they're going to get to start that conversation. I think the clients that I've been working with to rebuild homes are exceptionally lucky. Some of them had their check within the first week. I don't think that
Wow.
yeah, she's had an $800,000 check in her purse. Like, okay, let's not carry that around. But the insurance company are just not even answering calls or calling them back. And so there's such a wide range of how these relationships are going. And so I think it's like most things in life, we have to come to where you are and start working on the problem that's most immediate. And if that is that conversation with the insurance and they say, we want a bid, then so be it. I've sent some bids out that were just completely rejected on homes that didn't burn down but needed to be repaired. And so I think it is important to engage that to kind of see where we're going to land for each project based on what we're trying to achieve there.
Yeah, I think this is so important. Like, this is why I want to bring you on, Andrew, because not only do you bring the expertise, but you also bring the team and the empathy that's associated with this rebuild project. So, let me kind of take a step back a little bit and help the audience understand. Andrew, you have these 3 contractors that you trust very much with these projects. For somebody out there that's just looking at rebuilding right now and they're trying to pick a contractor, how do they pick the right contractor? And I want to lead this into, why do you trust these contractors so much? So, how should people go about vetting their contractors, and why have you picked the contractors that you're working with right now?
Yeah, I think this is going to be very tough for a lot of people because for me, I'm able to get the best pricing and get calls returned and text returned just because this is what I do all day, every day. If you are just a homeowner and don't have these relationships, you're competing against everyone that is calling and maybe aren't even serious yet. They're just trying to get a price per square foot or a range. So it's going to be very difficult for people who don't have those relationships. But what I would do if I didn't have those relationships is look around and see who is rebuilding in the area. Maybe even see if they're there and talk to that general contractor and like basically like you're going to steal their crews, right? And talk to them and see, because the most important thing is that they're doing it and that they complete it. There's a lot of people who want to come, that want to help, but the execution and the completion is the biggest thing. I mean, building is so hard in California, in Los Angeles. So if you can complete something, it's like that right there puts you ahead of everyone else because there's so many starts that just don't finish because it's how difficult it is. So I would say that is a great tip, but have this conversation and tell people exactly where you're at in the process and try to be as transparent as possible. Even offering them a little bit of money to help put a construction bid if you don't have that relationship, $100 here or something like that, just to establish that relationship and put you in a position where you're looking to give as well, because it is a lot of work to put a construction bid together. These guys should be out there building and managing their crews, not necessarily putting a bid together for someone that wants to just test them out. It is a lot of effort. So building that relationship with someone I think will be key, and to make sure that you're not dealing with someone that's going to give you a price that is just way out of the realm. I would say the word is probably price gouging, but I don't even know how you could spend $1,000 a square foot on an Altadena home. But I'm being told that all the time. No idea what that even would look like. Do you have like champagne fountains in the front yard? Can't even fathom what that looks like, right? But it's being told to people. And also having conversations with other people that are doing this to see what their pricing looks like so you can get comparables on other numbers.
This is so good. So I want to backtrack a little bit and make sure people understood. When you said they have started and completed, when you say completed, does that mean they get the certificate of occupancy? Is that what you mean when it gets to that
Yeah.
point? Okay.
Yeah, certificate of occupancy, you're now allowed to move in. You flip the light switch, the lights go on, you turn on the garbage disposal, and the front door doesn't open. You know that it's built well and it works. And the
All
city
right.
that you can now occupy the property.
Yeah, and then I loved how you pointed out to build that relationship, right? To give the $100 for a construction bid, because guess what, everybody? If the contractor is good, chances are they're busy, right? Let's be real honest. I mean, you should probably be very concerned if the contractor is not busy because there's so much work to go around right now. So I really loved your advice on trying to kind of have a give and take type of relationship instead of just testing the waters, using your words there, so to speak. And now that you picked the contractors and you are moving along construction, how much of a role should a homeowner expect to play during the construction? Because as you said, right, they probably don't know if that foundation is going as deep as it goes. So what's sort of your recommendation for in homeowner holding that contractor accountable so that they deliver on time, on budget as much as possible so that they don't run off?
Yeah, some of these things can be handled when you're looking at your construction contract. So you'd like to have in there a schedule of when we're expecting certain things to happen. And it's not going to be rigid. This is development and things happen, but a schedule. And then also schedule of payments. Then it's broken down. So you are saying after this is done, such as rough framing has been inspected and passes, that's when I do my next payment. So payments are based on milestones and things completed. And that way you're not just paying out, and you may not know that things aren't passing to the next stage because you don't know that what the next stages are. So those things are outlined in your contract on when certain milestones are hit, and that's when you pay the next step. And that's when you pay the next step, and also schedule. So you got an idea that this should be about 4 months That way, when it's month 6 and it's halfway built, you know that there's a problem here. You really are trying to solve for not knowing things, so you want to address the things that you can control or get an idea so it helps you with the parts that you don't know and you're inexperienced with. Once you have that contract and that schedule, I think it's important to do a site visit in the very beginning, like a pre-construction meeting with maybe the framer or whoever's doing the foundation or whoever the general contractor wants to go there to just talk about certain things. Because these are fire rebuilds, there may be a driveway that's still there or other stuff that the Army Corps of Engineers left, maybe some trees. So there is all these discussion items that we can talk about that aren't necessarily like how deep the foundation is because we already got that. We don't need your tech, we're not asking for technical, but there's going to be questions on certain things that the plan set aren't 100% sure of, or it's what you want to see. And then after you go through that conversation and you have a line of conversation going, whether it's with me or the project manager, so you know who you're going to communicate with, just try to be one person instead of everybody reaching out to you. That way it controls that they understand that the narrative is you're not a professional. They can't ask you if you can change a 2x4 with a 2x6 because you're not going to know that. Then I would say periodic visits just to see what's going on and take this opportunity to also learn what's going on and really dive into it like you are the developer because you are now the developer. You're developing a house, whether it's for you or whatever it may be. So go there and just get an idea of what's being done and watch the process and come out of this more experience and understanding of what happened and what took it. And I think that'll be very valuable and very powerful for people.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you said, hey, you're essentially a developer because you really are in this situation. You really are. And when we could talk about the payments, right? You talk about periodic check-ins and stuff like that. And you talked about the payment schedules. What kind of frameworks you suggest for someone, right? Obviously, their first time. Do you suggest certain milestones like, hey, if I can visually see that the framing is done, then that's the payment? Or might you recommend that you schedule your payments to follow along certain inspection points? Like, hey, when a rough framing is done. What's sort of your recommendation there for someone that might not know? How do I gauge the progress so I can make the right payments on time when it's justified?
I would say it's going to be a mix between how that contractor does their scheduling because they're going to do their ordering based off that. So you're not going to completely change their process, but also tying it to inspection milestones. That way, there's tangible proof that this milestone was hit because there's an inspection report, whether it's digital or whether it's signed on the inspection card that says this thing that we said is going to be done has been inspected and is completed. So you have that satisfaction of knowing that it was done. You don't need to have the expertise to go see that it was done. It was signed off. Good enough. We know it's done. Good enough. And so it could be a mix of milestones within the inspection process. And that contractor should be able to help you. And I understand there is a level of mistrust with contractors, but you are working with this person. You want to have a relationship. So they should know. And that's a good test of what milestones are going to be hit during the inspection process and they may add in something like a payment in between to order different materials. And so that they factor that in there as well. Not every contractor is able to carry the load of all of the budget up front or in between, but there should be some part where the contractor is some of the items are being paid for either by the money from the last payment or up to the next payment. There is a hold of that. You're not giving them 50% up front and then they're just buying everything and who knows what happens. That is a big red flag. It should be that maybe the first payment is maybe larger because of so much of the ordering of stuff, but it should not be a huge percentage and it should be fairly evened, if not decreasing as it gets closer to the end. Because near the end, it's more just the finish work and the labor and not as much of the heavy materials because that was the lumber and all of these materials once you get to that beginning point.
Yeah, I'm really glad you kind of set the expectation that there's a lot of materials to be purchased up front, right? So it's not the guy trying to run off with your money, but there are purchases that need to happen. And just for the folks that don't know what all the milestones are, right? How many inspections do take place? Is there rough framing, plumbing, electricals? Can you walk through kind of some of the inspections that the resident that is hiring you should expect to kind of go through or have the contractor go through during the build
Yeah,
process?
it can be 12 to 24 inspections, and you start off with your foundation, then you go to your footings, and making sure the bottom structural elements are good. Then there's rough framing, rough plumbing, rough electrical, rough mechanical. So that very first part. Then it goes to your drywall and your taping and your lath, which is preparing the exterior for whatever finish you have. And there are multiple inspections during this point. And a failed inspection doesn't mean your guy is, a failure. This happens all the time where some inspector says, look, I want to see this a little bit differently because that's the way he was trained. And so, unless you already know that ahead of time, and not everybody who has already worked with these people, it's going to happen, and you fix it. This was part of the process. And that they come out again the next day or whenever it's ready. Then from there, you get closer to your finish inspections and making sure that the waterproofing is done and that water drains correctly in the showers and in the sinks. And then from there, you have your final inspection, which is really a check of all the systems, solar panels, a pressure test for the sprinklers, because that's kind of near the end as well. And so you'll see that. But also, when you get a job card, when the permits are pulled, it has these list of inspections on there. So you can ask to see that and familiarize yourself with what's going to be on there. Now, everything doesn't apply because some of it's for restaurants and other
Correct.
type projects. And then you can just use the internet. And if you don't know what it is, just look it up and you can learn from that. I mean, if you don't use an AI language model, just type in on your chat GBT, what is exterior lap? And it'll tell you, and you can look at a picture and you'll know very quickly so that you don't have to not know what it is and be explained every time. You can do a little bit of the work.
Yes, way to teach people how to fish, man. Man, this has been so good. And I think people, if they just listen to this first section of this podcast, you are now armed with so much information that you are probably more qualified as a developer than 90% of California just by listening to Andrew and what he shared with you just now. So, man, Andrew, thank you so much for walking through that. Cause I think now people are looking to rebuild, they can just feel so much more at ease, everything that they got going on. So I'm really glad we went through it. Now, I want to pivot a little bit, Andrew, because for people that are looking to build an ADU now, right? Because I see you fighting for change to make building a little bit easier. What sort of issues are you particularly fighting for right now to help increase the amount of housing stock? I want to give you the floor there to kind of talk a little bit about your focus.
Yeah, I think right now a lot of the conversation is like straight up what is allowed and certain things that are being imposed on different projects that bring the cost up. Yesterday we just had a conversation with the city of Long Beach. And I think it's like once a year they're like, okay, we're reintroducing fire sprinklers. Like, guys, no, we did this before. Fire sprinklers are not allowed to be imposed. They're like, well, this one's different because it has 2 units. It doesn't matter. We can't do it. No, we're not doing this. And the reason why is because the cost added $70,000 to the project. And to be fair, sprinklers don't protect the exterior. They just slow down interior damage from being expeditiously burnt out, right? And it's very rare that it protects life and safety. It's more for protecting the houses. And so that conversation happens, but it's also like what can be approved in the beginning. We have a project, and I never knew this, but when you are converting an existing garage, that doesn't have to be your detached ADU. That can be your attached ADU. So
Oh,
you're allowed an attached ADU, a junior ADU, and a detached ADU. So you can have three ADUs on a single family home. But I was understanding that the attached ADU is your attached garage or or new construction next to it. But no, that doesn't have to be the case. So the project we're working on that we needed to get help with, because that's the way that the ADU handbook is, which is an amazing resource. If you look up the 2025 ADU handbook, the state of California prepares that. It was written by one of the greatest housing advocates within the state. And that gives you a lot of what you need to know. But it says that your attached ADU can be a conversion of a garage. It doesn't say it has to be a detached or an attached garage. You're just attaching the ADU to the garage, wherever it may be. So that things like this, where it's not as straightforward, and knowing what you're allowed to do is kind of like it comes from looking at the rules, knowing what's allowed, and then executing on it. But I would say, like, if someone wants to start researching on what they can do, just take a look at the handbook because that answers a lot of the questions. And then talk to someone like me or someone that is working on not only executing on this, but also writing some of the rules or being a consultant for the legislators that are writing the rules so that the boots on the ground, the people doing this, are having tools where the language makes sense. Because sometimes the translation of what gets passed in the government side isn't as easy to execute on because it goes through all this legalese and this horse trading and conversations. And then what you come out with, it's supposed to do something, but how does that really work? And who interprets it based on who's reading?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the ADU handbook in because you're right. When you look at some of the building codes, it's not very intuitive to the common person that's just trying to figure out what can I do and what can't I do, right? It blows my mind how complex it is sometimes. And I loved how you suggested folks to do some research. And sometimes you just got to execute because when you execute, you get certain things come up because I've never had a project that I went completely smoothly, 100% on time, 100% according to the budget. So now that you've been through so many of these plan reviews, right? What kind of like best practices do you have in terms of how do people get ahead of these back and forths, right? How do people get ahead of certain pushbacks or objections? Because obviously some of the stuff that you're going through right now, you just had to be in it. But is there anything that people can do to prevent that back and forth? Because at the end of the day, time is money. And when you cause so much delays, it can be really costly.
I mean, working with someone that knows these things obviously is going to help. Someone who's done one or two projects is not going to have the same experience as someone who's done 100 or 150 or 200. And another thing is be okay to say no. Say, I don't agree with this determination. Every time I resubmit a plan set, I say, "No, this we're not doing this, and here's why we're not doing it," respectfully. Most of the time, I try to keep it that way,
You
and
do. I see
say,
it.
like, it's a struggle, you know? Sometimes I get so frustrated, I'm like, I'm paying for this review, but I'm the one teaching here. I think I need to put an invoice attached to this." But but it's like, because of this government code section, because of this is protected, or because of this building code, you can't ask for that, or we're not gonna do that, or it's a waste of time. Stop asking me and stop asking everyone else for these things because that isn't part of the building process. It's just extra bureaucracy, extra things that whether they're trained that way or whatever. But we need to just kind of limit that stuff. So I see a lot of people that get turned away. And then I talk to them like, well, that's not correct. And then you go back and you tell them, oh, it's not correct because this way, like, oh, yeah, you're right. We didn't know about that. Because on the city side, the state law changes every year for all of the state laws. They're not usually that person in planning or building state isn't just reviewing just ADUs, they're reviewing everything. So, and there's no education component for them. No one at
Mm.
each year says, hey, here's the new laws, here's how it affects you. They only have to know all of it just on their own. And it's kind of unreasonable to expect that. So there is a working with someone or knowing for yourself, like, if you have a multifamily project, you could do up to 8 detached ADUs. It used to be 2, now it's up to 8. If you know that and someone says no, you say, "Oh, okay, well, I see where you could think that, but have you seen where this state law changed that?" And they will look at it and go, "Oh, you're right. I didn't know that." And then you can go from there.
And that's the difference between working with someone that knows what they're doing and doesn't, because Andrew is staying on top of these legislation changes, and I think it's so right, man. You gotta have a little bit of empathy because folks in city and plant, they're so busy. They're probably overworked. They're probably understaffed. So I think you have been so professional in how you respond to certain back and forths. I read it all the time. I was like, oh, that's a very logical explanation. And that's really why I always want to bring you back on to talk about what you're doing, man. And to the point of pulling back the current even more, right? Sometimes people have no idea. Like you said, people are getting quoted $300 to $1,000 a square foot. But when people are thinking about building an ADU, man, what are the sort of soft costs and hard costs? Like, can you help us break down the different categories of fees that might be associated with building an ADU? I really want the audience to understand, like, what can they expect whenever they're thinking about embarking on a project like that.
I think we'll start in the very beginning, which would be like your design team, and you're gonna have three phases of that. You'll have whoever's doing the architectural side, and they don't have to be an architect. They can be a designer. They could be a college student if they've gotten to this point. I'd be a little wary if you've never finished it again, like I said. But that person could be all types of people. It's not just like you have to be an architect for a project like this. And then you'll need whoever is putting together the structural engineering. And I personally try to make sure I have a structural engineer attached to every project. Not only do I think I get better treatment when it's being reviewed in the plan set, but also when it's being inspected because someone is putting their stamp and their liability to it. And it just makes the inspector feel a little bit more comfortable. There are things called prescriptive plans where they're just, if you build it this way, then you can do it and it's already set up. But I try to avoid that because I have found in my experience having an engineer there and a person you could call. When you just use these prescriptive plans, you can't call the guy who wrote it. It probably got wrote in 1972 by an engineer that
Mm.
worked for the city. Like that guy's not available to take your calls or do a request for inquiry on like how this is supposed to be done if something comes up, or maybe a piece of wood, we can't find it in that length. Can we do it this way? And so you have a person to talk to. Now the next phase is the Title 24, which does the energy calculation. So you don't personally, as a homeowner, need to have all these three contacts, but you need to make sure your person that you're working with has the ability to have all those because you can't just have one. You need all three. That price range from what I see can be around 6,500 at the absolute lowest end. And I'd be a little cautious at that number, even that they have everything and that they're getting it done because it's just how much work it is. It's pretty low. And then it can go up to, I would say 25 to 30,000 if you're getting a high design architect that is going to make you a very beautiful ADU and have all the materials and point out like what we're going to have for backsplash. And you're going to have a full set of plans that is just very little decisions being made by the homeowner on certain things. It's very explanatory on what we're doing in there. I fall in a little bit more of the middle category. So like for a single ADU, it's about 13,000 is what I charge for. And then if I do multiple, it's 10,000 each up to 60. And then I start, talking to people about different prices if we're doing like 12 unit buildings, things like that. And I think that gives someone a range on what to look for because everybody has their own business and what their cost and what their overhead is. But I think where my pricing is like middle to a little bit more just the expertise. And most of the projects I get are hard ones. It's not just a straightforward garage conversion. It's like every single time someone calls, it's like, okay, here's my problem. Like, yep, okay, that's all I know. Or I know we're gonna have a fight. Sometimes I submit to the state of California on a fight before I even submit because I know that I'm gonna have that fight. So at least I'll get that answer going before we get to it, right? And so I think that's the price range for that part. For city fees, typically the review fee, like the first fee you pay to the city is between 1,400 and 2,000, and that gets the departments paid. Some cities split that up, like you pay planning, then you pay building, and then you pay fire. And so those costs should be between, let's say, 15 and 3,000. That's what you should look for your review fees. Then after the plans have been reviewed and corrections are done, and they're like, okay, let's pull our permit. It depends on the size. For ADUs after 750 square feet, there are development fees, which typically are like an extra 5,000 added to the project. After 500 square feet, there's school fees, which is around $5 a square foot. But I see even some of the larger projects that I do kind of being around like 3,000, where multi units are like 10,000. Like if you're doing three ADUs, like 10,000 for the fees. Then construction costs is always very tricky because it depends on the design decisions you made. If you added steel because you're cantilevering, or if you kept it very structurally efficient. But I would say you're probably today in the LA area around 275 to 350 a square foot based on those relationships and how well it was done. At the higher end, if you don't have a great relationship or if there's some things in there that weren't like the most cost effective. And then in other places in California, I see up to like 500, 600 in like high demand areas like San Francisco or Santa Barbara, places where like it's very, maybe it's extremely difficult or there's just very few people that are really good at this. And so you're paying a premium because of the difficulty in order to get things done or the difficulty of the project. When you have San Francisco houses where there's no side yard and you have to take the material to the backyard through the house by opening up a wall, like these things are extra costs. I recently saw a San Francisco project. I'm like, how did you get this backyard done? Like, we cut in the house and drove everything through the ground floor. Like, well, yeah, how else are you going to do it? Good point.
Wow, and sometimes those are things that people don't think about, and man, Andrew, that's why I view you as essentially the cheat code, like the pro tip, the life hack to getting things done in California, and when you When people hire you, right? We talked about like the $13,000, $15,000 fee to kind of hire you for the plans. Do they also need to go out and find a structural engineer, or are you taking care of that for your client already?
Yeah, I take care of all of that, and it's good to have someone that does that because you want them to have someone they work with already, because there's a system that goes back and forth, and you want the structure to be delivered the right file format in the way they're used to seeing it. And when the city says we need to respond to these corrections, you don't want them to be someone that responds to you within a fair amount of time. In the beginning of my business, that structure in the year would take 2 months. So that means my project is on hold for 2 months for this guy. Now my guy does a day, 2 days. That's a timeline that you can work. You can't work with 2 months because if you have 3 rounds of corrections, that's 6 months of added time just for that part. So it has to be a whole team. You're not going to have, I suggest that the team all works together. Now you can piece them separately and it does work out, but the more people work together, the more efficient they are in their design and their time frames. So I suggest the designer or the architect that you choose supply either those resources or just handle it all in house. And I don't like people aren't interviewing my structure designer. You work with me, that's who you get. Uh, that's just what it is.
And sometimes that's just a smarter way to go about it because guess what? I mean, when a homeowner is dealing with the rebuild, think about how they're going to send the kids to school when they just got displaced. The last thing they want to figure out is like, how do I on earth do I even interview a structural engineer? Like, come on, like that's not your your expertise. So just trust the people that does this every single day. And Andrew, I want to kind of maybe this is the last question I want to kind of cover with you is there any difference if people are building the ADU for primary residence purposes versus if they were thinking about using it as like a rental income to help supplement their monthly income for their mortgage? Is there anything that people should be aware about when they're
Yeah,
going
I think
about?
I think the difference is really on the finish side of things, whether you're going to do a more durable carpet or a durable
Mm.
like vinyl tile, that's gonna live up to renters versus when you're talking about something that's maybe your own, you may spend a little bit more money on it because you're gonna care for it a little bit more. That's just the way things are when it's yours, you care about it. It's even to say like I think when doing ADU, you should also give some private space to that ADU if possible so that people maintain it. If it's all common area, then it just doesn't get maintained at the same level. I don't know. It's a human thing. When this is mine and it's dedicated to me, I take care of it. When it's everybody's, then it's not. If people take care of their backyard, they don't go and mow the lawn at the park because that's everybody's, even though they're using it, right? So it's just like when it's dedicated, it's mine. People they take care of it. There's a pride of ownership. And so I think there's going to be a difference in what you spend in the finishes and what that looks like tile, flooring, faucets, showers, those things. I think that's the main difference. And you see that even in larger multifamily, like if it's a condo or so we spend more money on that. If it's a rental, it's a middle grade renter grade that's just more durable and lasts up to the traffic and more.
And there's no difference in terms of approval timelines if you're using that ADU for a primary residence versus a rental, right? It's all the same.
All the
Okay.
same, it's not even the jurisdiction can't even like, it's not up to them what to do with it, they shouldn't even ask, it makes no difference to them.
Oh, okay. And what about people that live in HOAs? Like, how might they have you ever had to, like, have a discussion, is that how I put it likely, with an HOA that's very anti-ADUs? What has been your experience there?
I have not personally done an HOA project, but as the guy that sometimes has to be the fixer, I've been brought into those conversations, and there are state laws out there that say HOAs can't be a reason for denial, and there's very limited what they can say, and they do. It is a contentious point, and the state's aware of it, and there is some guidance that they've been working on for years for that. So the HOA can put up a fight, but at the end of the day, there are state laws that override their own rules that allow you to do an ADU. So it's not a no. And mostly I don't even I would see my guidance is don't even approach them if you don't need to. Get your plans, get your permits, and you can start your construction and you have a legal framework that says you're allowed to build things. So then they can be upset at that point. What happens there, it depends on how hard that person wants to go. But the HOA should not be a reason to say no.
Man, Andrew, I am just so grateful for you coming onto the podcast today, and I'm just so impressed with how much impact you're making in the communities. I I just follow your journey all the time, and I see the impact that you have to just like saving a homeowner $70,000 from a fire sprinkler mandate, right? That's real. That's real money, and that's real impact that not only you're helping normal everyday clients, but also with the people that's rebuilding right now that really needed a sense calmness amidst all that chaos. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad to call you a friend, man. And hey, is there anything else that you want to cover today that we didn't get a chance to cover that you think is pretty important to get out there in terms of messaging?
Yeah, I think there are some state bills that I'm working on, and some of them have like no, they're not controversial. Like Assembly Bill 818 allows you to optionally add solar panels or the battery backup, and it's an option because some of the insurance companies are saying, "Oh, you're putting electrical on the roof. That's a reason for us to deny your insurance claim." And so like, but California building code requires you to have these things. So it's like we needed to pass a law that comes into effect during a hazard, natural hazard or disaster that kind of addresses some of these things that are good intentions, but maybe there's some special circumstances that don't make sense. And that has no, there's no pushback on that. There's a bill, Assembly Bill 647, that I've been working on, and that got pushed back to a 2-year bill. And this is definitely controversial. It is that up to 8 units for sale can be allowed on any parcel pretty much in California that allows residential. So your R1 neighborhood can have up to 8 units. And it's not really too much different than what's allowed now if you do all the tools and the tricks together. So if you do ADUs with a subdivision and then split the lot, you can get 8. But this is without having to jump through all the hoops. It's just like you're allowed 8. Maybe we don't have to layer 7 different laws and different processes, and we can and have those. And it's really starter homes. That's what we're missing is starter homes for people that want to have a smaller project that isn't a large 300 unit building, and that's what this bill was is going to do. And there was some miscommunication with the California realtors. They were extremely against it because they thought we're going to take out their single family homes and then they won't have anything to sell and it'll ruin their income stream. I think it was short-sighted because now I have 8 homes to sell. And so there's a lot
Go
more revenue.
figure.
And let's be real, a lot of really not everybody is the top producer and they're killing it. There's the same affordability for everybody on how to buy their first home. I mean, I'm still a renter and I'm doing pretty well. It's hard out there to put the money together and to buy a home, or if you are looking to have your money build your net worth, like buying a home is kind of a scary way to put all your capital. But if you can get these like lower price point homes because we're able to put them in places we didn't before and there's more supply, then it increases affordability. So like to anyone that's listening, it's coming back next year, but just, maybe figure out who your assembly member is or your senator and just send them a little note saying, "Hey, I support AB 647, and I would like to see more gentle housing in my areas. The infrastructure will be able to support it. We're not running out of water because we added, 7 units. It's that." And the thing is, it's that, or we're going to build a 5-story 51 unit there because we need the housing. So, like, if we did smaller spots everywhere, then we wouldn't need to do the much larger projects to make up for it. And we have not built for years and years and years, and we're so far behind that we need to come up with something. I understand change is scary. And I understand when you bought something like you wanted it to stay that way forever. But when we're building, we're not building for you. We're building for the future of our communities, the future residents that get to live in these beautiful places we get to live at. And if we don't allow that to happen, then our tax basis for the city is going to suffer. Then our businesses are going to suffer. Our school districts are not going to have people going there, and the schools are going to close because people aren't moving here and having kids. There's just a big effect that people don't think of in the longevity when they're just thinking, I don't want more traffic on my street, or where are people going to park? Maybe you could park in your driveway or in that garage that you have. I mean, just an idea. So I want more people to think about building for the future and future residents, and let's think about it that way. And that's what AB 647 was going to do, and hopefully still will do next year. And also, on top of that, play a role in watching what's going on at your city council, watching is more pro housing or who's making these smart decisions, and voting for them and supporting them and letting them know we have your back. It's not always politically positive to stand up for these things, but they need to have cover and they need people to go and say, "Hey, we support you." Because the people who don't want any change, they have they typically have nothing to do, and they're gonna be there, and they're gonna say, "I want nothing anywhere," and then your kids are gonna suffer and not have to have a place to live. So be involved with what allows. I know it's tough and it takes time, but you just sending an email to a city council member or Instagramming them, "Job well done," it goes a long way. So just take a look at what's going on. I always wanna bring that up to people to be involved with what how you can be.
Yeah, and I know that sometimes people feel helpless, right? They think, "Oh, my one vote doesn't matter," but it absolutely does, especially when you're at the local level, just like what Andrew said. So, and I challenge everybody, hey, look at both sides of these issues. Understand all the perspectives because I think we just raising kids in general, like I have a 3-year-old daughter and I just want her to always be mindful of the other perspective, to challenge what has been the norm because if you don't, how can you ever stay curious? How can you ever stay open minded? And how can you listen for just the betterment of humanity? So, man, Andrew, I had so much fun on this one, dude. I learned so much from you. I had so much fun. And I'm sure people after listening to this is going to want to work with you. So, Andrew, how do people get in touch with you? How do people find out about what services you provide?
The best way is to follow my Instagram, Andrew R Slocum, Slocum, and just watch what I'm posting, watch the stories. That's the main thing if you have it to just see what's going on. So you could just see like the pushback or the way we address these things to understand what we even mean. Take a look at some of the projects so you see what that looks like. And then you can email me, Andrew at greendev.co. Andrew at greendev.co. You may get forwarded to my admin, who's actually, secretly my mother. She works for me now within the city, and like, she's able to do things that I can't do because she had that relationship and that workflow. I've always been like private business, my own thing. I don't have the thing that she has, and she'll schedule a time to talk, and we'll get through it and see what you need.
All right, guys, please, please, please reach out to Andrew. Work with this guy because I have not seen a better advocate in the state of California for when it comes to building. Please, please work with him. And Andrew, I'm so glad you came on. I cannot wait to bring you back on again. Just talk about other projects. I think that would be super fun, man. But hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it so much.
It's a pleasure. It makes me so happy to have these conversations with you. Thank you, man.
Thank you, and we are out.